What's going on, everybody? I'm Jabby Kaway. I am currently visiting family on the East Coast. I am staying at my Aunt Teresa and Uncle Joe's place in New Jersey. I was watching YouTube videos earlier today, including a few reviews on The Whale, and I thought to myself, I should throw my opinion on this because so many people want to know about my feelings on The Whale. I say that a little bit sarcastically because I don't think this video is going to get any views, but I still wanted to contribute to this conversation and maybe inspire some people to go watch the movie in case they weren't even considering it, because I think it's very, very much worthwhile. Now, that's going to sound like I'm contradicting myself because I feel like I'm going to title this I Didn't Love the Whale. I'm not misleading anybody, like I didn't love the movie, but the reason why I am saying go watch it anyways because I do really appreciate this film. There's a lot to love here. I will never watch it again, but I really appreciated the experience of it. And I think the reason I didn't love it is because I'm so familiar with Aronofsky's work. There were certain things I came to expect, and I got pretty much what I expected, and not in a good way. I don't want to get too much into what I didn't love about it because I feel like that would be spoiler territory, so I'll put that on the back end of this video, but I want to front end with what I appreciate about it and why you should go watch it. Darren Aronofsky directed The Whale. It's written by Samuel D. Hunter. It's starring Brendan Fraser, Sadie Sink, Hong Chau, and Sympkins. It's about Charlie, who is a man who is very, very, very overweight, and he gets some really bad news that he doesn't have much time left, and so he tries to make amends with his daughter, who is estranged from his life. The film is shot in a 4:3 aspect ratio, which is more of the traditional old school square format. It's not a choice I would have ever made as a director, but I do appreciate Aronofsky's choice to do it that way because it does give you a sense of claustrophobia, which helps with what the main character Charlie's experiencing. The whole movie takes place in this one location, just his living room, essentially. I mean, you explore his house a little bit, but it's mostly taking place in his living room. And for a film that only takes place in one spot for the most part, I think it's very compelling and very, very well done. Much in Aronofsky fashion, just like with Martin Scorsese, who never pulls his punch when it comes to violence in his gangster movies. Here, Aronofsky doesn't pull his punches when it comes to really showing you what he needs to show you that this character's going through. There are instances where it's just so hard to watch because this character is dealing with an addiction. It treats food like a drug, which, for all intents and purposes, with the way food is made these days, not that the movie's about that, but with the way food is, it basically is a drug. And sometimes those scenes are so tough to watch. Like, it is like, whoa, it's brutal, man. It makes you feel horrible, but in a great way. I hope I'm selling you on the movie still. It's shot well. It's the music is great. The acting is just like, whoa, man. The acting is so good in this. I'm specifically talking about Brendan Fraser, of course. That's what you're going to hear everyone talking about, is how great Brendan Fraser is. If he doesn't get an Oscar, it's fucking sad if he doesn't get an Oscar because he did such a good job. He brings a vulnerability and an authenticity to this character. You just buy into it. I mean, it tugged at my heartstrings. I feel like I've heard other people talking about the other cast members being superb and great as well. I don't necessarily agree with that. Not that they did a bad job. It's just that it doesn't measure up to what Brendan Fraser was bringing to the table here. If on a scale of 1 to 10, I feel like the other cast members, including Sadie Sink, who did a good job herself, I feel like everyone else was like at a 7.5, maybe an 8 sometimes, and Brendan Fraser was blowing past all that at an 11, 12. Like, he just did such a great job. And for his performance alone, I would watch this. Aronofsky did a great job with pulling out that performance and keeping you, the viewer, engaged from start to finish. He did a really, really good job in that regard. Like I said, the whole thing takes place in one location, and when you're dealing with a story like that, it's very, very challenging, I think, to keep your audience like fully engaged with what's happening, because there's lots of stories out there that take place all in one location, but oftentimes they just get kind of boring after a while, and you just feel kind of anxious because you want it to go somewhere else. And I think that this movie did a really, really good job of somehow keeping you engaged from start to finish. And that's a combination of Darren Aronofsky's work and Brendan Fraser's stellar performance. From start to finish, there isn't anything that feels disingenuous. It feels super authentic, and it's one of the best performances ever captured on camera. Yeah, I mean, there you go. I said everything I have to say. If you aren't interested in the film after all that, then I guess, whatever. But it's definitely different, and it's definitely not for everybody. This movie is, if you're not familiar with Aronofsky, I mean, I guess this is one to start with that would be quite a punch. I love all of Aronofsky's work for the most part. Requiem for a Dream, The Fountain, The Wrestler, Black Swan, and Noah. Like, I love his body of work. I know that Mother was not like a popular film. A lot of people had problems with it. I really appreciated it. And the same thing for The Fountain, same thing for Noah. Like, I know that these are not movies that people necessarily love, but I found something to appreciate in all of these, to the point that I could say that I love these movies. So with all that in mind, I had a sense as to what to expect when it came to The Whale. I'm going to go into spoiler territory a little bit here, so if you don't want to know anything about this movie, if you haven't seen it yet, I suggest shutting this off, clicking out, watch something else, go watch the movie, and then come back if you can. Okay, this is going to be a weird comparison, but if you guys have seen the movie Up, I feel like most people watching this have probably seen Up. Carl, his objective is to get his house onto a cliff that overlooks Paradise Falls. That was his objective, right? When he does that, when he accomplishes it, he realizes that's not the move. There's something that triggers him, that cues him to realize this is not the move. And he unloads weight from his house so he can use it as a means to rescue the other characters in the film that need rescuing. And he actually ends up losing his house and gaining a blimp. So the reason I bring that up is because he went into his adventure with an objective in mind, but then he had to pivot. He had to change course because he realized while he set out on his journey with this in mind, that was no longer the mission. That was no longer the move. He had to do this other thing instead, which required him to sacrifice his most prized thing, which is his house, because it was representative of his wife. I know this is the strangest comparison, and I apologize. I do that sometimes. In The Whale, Charlie, his objective is to amass a certain amount of money to give to his daughter. The thing is, he's been estranged from his daughter for 10 years. He finally reconnects with her. She needs a dad in her life. And maybe I'm taking this too personally. I mean, my dad was in my life, but I have a real pet peeve about dads not being in their kids' lives, or parents in general not being in their kids' lives. It's like, if you're going to have a kid, be in their fucking life. Like, don't abandon them. Not that Charlie, had much of a say-so. In this case, his ex-wife kept him away, but he was able to reconnect with his daughter. His daughter needed a dad. And instead, he stayed steadfast to his goal, which was to amass this money to give to his daughter, when it was so painfully clear that she needed a dad in her life. He needed to get himself to the hospital and use some of that money, or all of it, so she could have a father in her life. And he denied her that. He went out the way he wanted to go out, doing what he wanted to do, which is very typical Aronofsky. Oftentimes his main character dies in his movies, but I don't think that needed to happen here. Now, I understand that this is based on a play, and I understand that he was adapting this play, and pretty much the play verbatim was used for this movie. I get that, but it's an adaptation, and he's allowed to make changes to the story to better fit cinema. And I think that while what I'm expressing is probably more cliche, it's more Hollywood, I think it was necessary. It didn't make me hate the movie or anything like that. I just walked out going, well, that was typical Aronofsky. That's what Aronofsky has done in every single one of his movies except for Noah. Like, his characters always end up on a down, and that's how they go out. Now, some might debate that. Some might say that he ended on an up because he connected with his daughter and he gave her something. And I can see that angle, that spin on it. I get it, and I respect that perspective. But for me, he abandoned her. Instead of using his money to fix himself so he can be present, he left and just left her with a bunch of money. It's like, what is she going to do with that? Like, you can use your imagination where a messed up character like, what Sadie Sink was playing in the movie, what is she going to do with that money? You know what I mean? To me, that was just not the move. I think that in the end, Charlie should have, given into Hong Chau's request, which is to go to the hospital. I understand, again, like I said, that's more cliche, that's more Hollywood. But for me as a viewer, even though I'm familiar with Aronofsky, and even though I love Aronofsky's body of work, this is one instance where I just really disagreed with the ending, where I'm like, yo, he just abandoned her. He left her fatherless. Why? That's why I didn't love the movie. I still think that it was very well done, for all the aforementioned reasons, whether it's the music, the way it's shot, the acting, all of it, how it was made. It was excellent. I just wish the ending was different. It's like, at the end of the day, after all the acting and whatever, it's like, but how did I feel about that ending? You know what I mean? I didn't love it. I feel like I'm probably going to get some pushback in the comments from those who have watched it, and people are going to be like, oh, no, like, it was perfect for X, Y, and Z reasons. And I get that. I totally understand why people might feel that way. I think that just for me watching it, I was like, there's no need for it to go out this way. I can understand in The Wrestler, I can understand in Black Swan, I can understand in The Fountain, or even in Mother. Like, I get why in those films those characters had to go out that way. I didn't get it here. He had options. And he clearly had a support team. There was no need to go out that way. Nonetheless, I really appreciate it. I still think it's worth watching. I still really appreciate what Aronofsky does, and I still very much look forward to his next picture. So you guys, hopefully you enjoyed this. Thanks for hanging out. I'm Jabby Kaway. Peace out.